Hello, it's Jay here again and welcome to another tutorial. In the last lesson, we'd set up our finite state machine, but in this video we're going to work on getting some of the basic functionality in place. And we're going to start with the void seconds count function. Now, first things first, I'm going to change this to a float. So public float counter. The rest can remain as an int, because I'm going to show you something when we come to fill out this function. But the next thing I'm going to do is come to the void update. So we'll come inside there and we just need to call that function. Seconds counter, open and close brackets, will close the line off. And we'll put it straight into the comments, and in fact I'm going to use the naming convention start seconds counter function. So we've changed this to a float and we're starting this function in the void update. So this function's going to be running all the time. Now we don't need the others running all the time, the minutes and the hours, and that will become apparent as we fill out this block. So with that said, let's come inside the seconds counter function now, and we'll make a start on filling it out. So we'll say if open brackets underscore counter, we're going to say double equals 60. And we'll close brackets there. No need to close the line off. I'll just make sure my comments are in line. And it's quite simple. If the counter equals 60, we'll come to the next line. Then we're going to reset the counter. And we do that just by saying underscore counter equals 0, just one equals sign this time, and we'll close the line off into the comments. So then we'll say then make counter equal to 0. So we'll come below here. So this allows us to cycle to a minute. So as soon as we hit 60 seconds, we reset back to 0 so it can count up again. The next line we're going to say underscore counter, and we're going to say plus then equals. Now the counter we want to count up, so we say counter plus and equals, so we're adding to the counter. And rather than using a numeric value, what we're going to do is say time dot delta time. We'll close the line off and into the comments. So we'll say counter plus, and we'll say count plus time sync to PC speed. And you can word your comments however you want, but I've worded it this way for now, and let's just go over how this bit of code works. So we have the counter, we want it to count up, so we use the plus and equals. Now time.delta time means that it will count up in seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4, obviously. But the reason why we used this is because if you implemented this inside a game, and let's say that game was running on 2 PCs, and one PC was lower end and could only run the game at 30 frames a second, while the other one could run it at 60, what would happen if we didn't use this is the one that's running at 60 frames a second would count up faster than the one running at 30 frames a second. But by using this piece of code, that's why I've put sync to PC speed. And it's worth reading up about this on the Unity website. But what it means is that it will count up at the same speed regardless of how powerful the PC is and how many FPS it is running at. So this is a great way of making sure that the game runs consistently across a number of PCs. So with that said, let's continue on. Now we're going to say underscore seconds, and it's going to be equal to the counter. And we can close the line off. Now we have a problem now. You see, this is a float and this is an int. And because of that, this will not work. So the way we do it is we come in front of counter and we'll open and close brackets. We'll come inside the brackets and we'll say int. So this way, seconds is equal to the counter cast as a whole number. And that's the difference between a float and an int. A float can exist, as you can see here, as 0.5, 0.25, where an int we normally use for whole numbers. So we cannot make one equal the other without casting it. So we say take the counter value, cast it to an int, the nearest whole number, and then that is what seconds is equal to. So let's put that into the comments, and we'll say seconds, and we'll say equals counter, and we'll say cast to an int, and we'll come below there. Now the way in which this is set out is very deliberate. We need to have this come first before this line, because otherwise the counter could end up going above 60, and in which case this piece of code would not work correctly. So the order is actually very deliberate. And with that said, let's continue on. And we'll say if open brackets our counter is less than 60, we'll close brackets, no need to close the line off, and we'll come straight to the comments and we'll say if counter is less than 60, and we'll say return. We'll close the line off, into the comments, and we'll say then do nothing and return. So if the counter hasn't counted all the way up to 60 yet, what this means is we don't want any more code in this block being read. And it works for the code we're going to implement now, the code that comes beneath this block. So this will still be read, but if it hasn't already if it's less than 60, then we return, which means we return and we start reading through the code here, but we don't read any of the code down here. But let's continue on. We'll say if open brackets our counter is greater than 60, we'll close brackets, we'll put it into the comments, so we'll say if counter is greater than 60, we'll come below and we'll say underscore counter equal 60, and we need to close the line off there and into the comments, and we'll say then make counter equal to 60, and we'll come below there. So even though I explained the order in which this occurs to make sure we cannot go above 60, this is in as a fail-safe. So that's why we have this bit of code. For the sake of such a small piece of code, it's always worth having in. It's certainly not going to make any difference. So we'll put that in just to be on the safe side, that if the counter ever does go above 60, then we'll just make it equal to 60 so this piece of code can work. And we'll come below here and we'll say if open brackets our counter again double equals 60. We'll close brackets, no need to close the line yet, straight into the comments. So we'll say if counter is equal to 60, we'll come below here and then we'll say minutes counter, open and close brackets, we'll close the line off and into the comments. And in fact I'll just say call, and again we'll use the naming convention, so call minutes counter function, and we'll just save that off there. So once we hit a minute, so we've counted up to 60 seconds, we've hit a minute, then we call this function the minutes counter, but we only call it once every 60 seconds. And that's why we don't need the minutes counter in the void update, and it's also a great way of optimizing code. If we had it in the void update, obviously this block of code would be read all the time, which is unnecessary. We'll just say once it hits 60, which is only going to happen once a minute, we'll just call that function once. And we'll make sure we've saved it off there, and we'll downsize the mono develop, and let's just add this to the directional light for now. And there we go, we can see all our values, and let's just hit start for now. And as you can see, the counter is counting up. You can see it can exist at 7.8 or any value between a whole number, but as soon as it hits a whole number, the seconds is then equal to it, and it only exists as an int, a whole number. So that bit of code's working. In the next lesson we'll work on filling out the other functions, but I think we'll leave it here for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope to see you next time, and until then, as always, bye for now.